It is 2 a.m. in Washington, D.C., 8 a.m. in Berlin, and 4 on a Friday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Hyun-bin, and this is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. We start with the latest development out of North Korea. Inter-Korean relations seem to be going on the right track, as seen with the success of the 2 rounds of reunions for war-separated families that ended early this week. But on Thursday evening, Pyongyang launched 4 short-range missiles into the East Sea. Hyun-bin reports.
The South Korean Defense Ministry said Friday that North Korea's latest missile launch seems to have been planned to coincide with the start of Seoul's annual military drills with Washington. The ministry said the North had fired 4 projectiles, which, considering their speed and direction, are presumed to have been short-range Scud missiles. This is the North's first Scud missile launch in 5 years. The launch also follows an incursion by a patrol boat over the de facto maritime border between the 2 countries on Monday, which the Seoul's defense minister said at that time was sent to test the South Korean military. The ministry said the South Korean military is prepared for any provocations from the North. Just hours before the launch, Seoul had proposed a round of Red Cross talks to resolve humanitarian issues, including reunion for families separated by the Korean War. Seoul's unification ministry said on Friday that it is looking to see if the launch would affect inter-Korean relations and the talks that are expected to be held as early as next week. On top of that, a private organization had recently offered to send supplies and food aid to the North, worth nearly $180,000. With the recent improvement of inter-Korean relations, some experts believe the North executed the launch to gain some leverage during negotiations between the 2 Koreas. Other experts believe that this was a protest against the strong condemnation of the North's nuclear program and human rights violations by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Either way, the South Korean government is keeping a close eye on the situation and plans to set up countermeasures against future provocations. Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
A top U.S. defense official says Pentagon's plan to cut the Army's overall troop numbers will not affect the number of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. Speaking at a forum in Washington this week, Acting Deputy Secretary of Defense Kristen Fox said the U.S. military operations in Korea will not be affected, as they are crucial to ensure the security of the Korean peninsula. She added the U.S. military rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region will also not change. Currently, there are slightly over 28,000 U.S. troops stationed in Korea. Earlier this week, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel unveiled plans to cut U.S. Army numbers by between 70 and 80,000. Former Japanese Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama says Tokyo should scrap plans to revise its landmark apology for forcing women to work as sex slaves for its military during World War II. When asked about the Abe government's recent remarks on reconsidering the 1993 Kono statement, Murayama said reopening the case would do nothing but offend Koreans. Murayama had apologized for Japan's wartime atrocities during his premiership as the first socialist prime minister in nearly 50 years. Meanwhile, the Chinese government has decided to designate a national memorial day for the victims of the 1937 Nanjing massacre. Analysts say the move is part of China's protest campaign against Japan following Abe's visit to a controversial war shrine that honors several Class A war criminals. Here in the nation, the National Assembly is expected to vote on 160 bills on Friday, the last day of this month's extraordinary session. The list of bills on the table includes one that would allow the parliament to swiftly appoint special prosecutors for investigations into sensitive issues. However, it is unclear whether bills related to people's livelihoods will gain approval before the session ends because of differences among the rival parties. The parties are particularly divided over a pension bill that would offer a monthly pension to senior citizens over the age of 65 in the bottom 70% of the income bracket. One of Korea's nuclear reactors shut down suddenly this Friday morning. The 950,000 kilowatt Hyun-bin 2 reactor in Yeonggwang, Jeollanam-do province came to a halt at around 10:50 a.m. State-run plant operator Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power said it is investigating the exact cause of the shutdown, but added that the incident will not interfere with electricity production. This is the first time in 7 years the reactor has shut down, and the second nuclear reactor shut down this year, following one reported late last month in Ulsan, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Korea has 23 nuclear reactors, and with the shutdown today, 6 are now offline. Switching gears now, industrial output in Korea's mining and manufacturing industries continue to expand in January, marking the 4th straight month of gains. But last month's 0.1% growth has declined sharply from the previous month, largely because there were fewer workdays due to the Lunar New Year holiday. Statistics Korea says the growth of overall industrial output inched up to the 1% range in January, suggesting the domestic economy may be recovering. Spending jumped to a 34-month high of 2.4% due to an increase in sales of food and automobiles during the New Year holiday. Let's now take a look at how the local stock market closed. Seoul shares traded stronger on Friday as investors welcomed the news that the U.S. Federal Reserve may be flexible with the tapering of its bond buying program. The benchmark Kospi edged up to finish at 1979, giving way to hope that it will hit the 1980 mark soon. The tech-heavy Kazakh edged up 0.1% to 528. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won changed hands at 1,067 won against the greenback. In the U.S. state of California, there is a movement to divide the state, the country's richest and most populous, into 6 separate states. While seemingly far-fetched, the plan is getting closer to making it onto a ballot initiative in November, with organizers having gained approval to collect signatures. This initiative is sponsored by Silicon Valley venture capitalist Tim Draper, who says political representation of California's diverse population and economies has rendered the state nearly ungovernable. And today, we take a look at this issue with Dr. Shin Se-don, professor of economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Dr. Shin returned from a trip to California just yesterday, and he has a lot to share with us on this very topic. Hello, Dr. Shin.
My pleasure.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, who is the driving force behind this initiative, and what exactly are they demanding?
Well, as you said, Tim Draper, who's a famous venture capitalist for 3rd generation, is in the front line, who advocated the division of California into 6 smaller states. And if you look at the picture on the screen, the 6 states are the state of Jefferson and the state of Silicon Valley. Those 2 states are novel one in the sense that the names are quite different from the California, and the rest of the 4 states are North California, West California, South California, and Central California. So they wanted to split the state of California into smaller 6 kind of dwarfs. That's what they've demanded in the coming ballot for the referendum.
So why is a 3rd-generation venture capitalist, who's Tim Draper in this case, demanding that California be divided into 6 smaller states? What are the economic and political reasons for this initiative?
Well, in their announcement, they pointed out that state of California, most populous state, have just 2 senators, like all other states. United States populations are over 300 million, and there are 100 senators. So if you divide, each senator represents about 3 million population. But in the case of California, population is 38 million and only 2 senators. So they believe that Californians are not well represented in the U.S. Senate. That's one point. And the second point they pointed out is because the monopoly or giant of being the state of California, so it provided no chances of a bitter competition. So no competition within the states gendered the state of California become incompetent to solve the challenging problems. So second reason for the split was to encourage competition within the states by dividing into 6 smaller states. And the number 3 is that by dividing the giant state into smaller states, the local resident or regional residents could be better prepared for their own policy. In other words, the policy of the current giant California could be good for some part of the resident, but may not be true for the rest of the state. So by dividing the state into smaller sections, the state policies could be more responsive to the demands for the local residents. So those 3 reasons: 1, better representation in the U.S. Senate, and second, encouragement of the competition, and the better representation within the local region. That are the 3 most important reasons for the split.
So what does the public think of the idea? Is there any opposition to it?
Well, if you read, the editorials or a lot of newspaper items in especially the western part of the state of California, state of Arizona, state of Utah, you will see that the majority of the response was quite negative. Some says, it is a waste of time, waste of resources, 100%, crazy idea. So I think the public feeling about the idea is quite negative. And one of the funny, joke about the idea was that, the most Americans are familiar with the national flag with the 50 stars. But if this idea is taken, the star has to be 55, and they could never have, thought about that idea. So majority of the people outside and as well as inside, people are pretty negative about the idea, I think.
Yes, I think the idea is very innovative and kind of shocking and also
but also very
far-fetched.
crazy and
Yes.
it's hard to understand.
So is this the first time that the similar idea was proposed?
Well, to most Koreans, it was shocking because it was shocking to me. But if you look at, if you go back to the U.S. history, especially the history of California, there had been more than 227 times, attempts to divide the state of California. And among 227 trials, 27 were very successful, and 2 attempts were almost 99% success, in the sense that, some extraordinary developments, hamper the actual initiation of the second. First one is 1850, the idea was that to divide the California into 3 parts: northern part, the central part, and the southern part. And northern part, the name was the state of Shasta, and the southern part of the state of Colorado, and the central part was the state of California. But later on, the state of Colorado actually established into the United States. But the idea was passed as the legislature assembly in the state of California. But the 1860, there was a civil war, and there was certain states, tried to secede from the union. So that kind of environment hampered actual implementation. And second was in 1941. And in that case, the northern part, which is the state of Jefferson, in 1941, the people in the northern part of California and the southwestern part of the Oregon, people got together to establish a new state under the name of the state of Jefferson. And it passed all the legal mandates and forth. But 1941 and 1942, the United States got into the Second World War, and the movement was hampered. So the idea of the state of Jefferson has been through in 2003, 2009, and in these 6 states, the northern part is named the state of Jefferson, and the idea in 1941 still is alive in the current plan.
Wow, so this idea has a quite long history. I'm
right.
very surprised.
Right.
How likely is it that, though, the proposal will make it onto the ballot in November?
Right. For that idea, proposal to become a ballot in November election, the initiator has to get at least 8,000, signature from the registered voters. That's the first challenge. And second challenge is the California should vote in November election on that proposition, whether the proposition should be a successful one. And if that proposal passed as a proposition, then the U.S. Congress has to act upon it. And finally, U.S. President has to, decide onto the matter. So I think there are four major obstacles for this idea or proposal to become a reality, and in which many people believe that the probability is very close to 0%.
So then, what implications does this have for Korea, if any?
Well, at least in theory or in theoretical context, the idea is novel in the sense that they emphasize efficiency, they encourage competition and effectiveness. So if you look at the idea of proposal just in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, that will be fine, and they'll be very attractive. And you could find the similar arguments in Korea in the sense that there has been a talk about, division of Korea into a smaller, more efficient, company. And also there has been a lot of serious talk about public sector restructuring in the sense that because many public firms and public institutions have a lot of debts and a lot of inefficiency, in order to get over that inefficiencies, one solution is split up into some efficient companies to survive and the rest to be killed. So there is the idea of competitiveness, and also the efficiency and effectiveness is the main themes in Korean political agenda. So the idea of California split has a parallelism in Korean political landscape. So if you look at the issue just in terms of efficiency and competition, I think you could say that big public companies in Korea should split up, and also you could say the giant city of Seoul should divide up into 2 or 3 or 4 regions. And also you could say that the Gyeonggi province should, it's been so big, so you may argue that the Gyeonggi province has to be split into 2 or 3 states. And you could argue that kind of arguments, like the state of California, you could apply that idea into Korean political or economic landscape.
I do think that there are many parallels, between this and Korea's case. Right. And I think it's also interesting that the person who's, proposed this idea is a venture capitalist. Right. And Korea puts so much emphasis nowadays to innovation and creative economy, and therefore, quite the parallels, as you said. Right.
The interesting thing is, that the center of IT is Silicon Valley, and they argued to split the state in terms of encouraging the competition and enhancing the effectiveness. So if you bring that argument into Korean landscape, and you could say that you could divide the city of Seoul, you could divide the Korea, you could divide the public entities. So if we follow that argument or rationale, you could say the similar things in Korea too. But the interesting thing is, in the United States, the general perception of the idea is very negative, right? So if we follow the example of United States or the state of California case, right, the people should oppose more than 99.99% oppose the idea. But in Korea, there are more people very, actively advocating the idea of, competition, idea of effectiveness. And in order to solve that kind of, puzzle, okay, my point is that, if efficiency is the only standard, if the effectiveness is the only standard, maybe Tim Draper is right. You divide as many as possible as long as it could enhance competition. But in reality, right, efficiency is not the only standard that we should look after. There's an issue of fairness, the issue of equality, issue of justice, and equality of the opportunities. So there are many other goods or values than efficiency. So if you if you follow a kind of a fair, fair standard of values, I think, it is not the efficiency or competition should be the only driving force for political action, such as splitting the state, splitting the company, or splitting a public entities. So we should be balanced in the sense that effectiveness is a good thing, but we have to look after some other goods, such as equality, fairness, removing polarization. Those kind of ideas is also as important as effectiveness. That is my view.
All right. Well, Dr. Shin, thank you so much for joining us today. We will have to keep an eye on what becomes of this initiative.
Right. My pleasure.
Turning now to the latest in crisis-hit Ukraine, where armed men have seized the regional parliament in a mainly ethnic Russian region. The United States is urging Russia to show in the coming days that it's sincere about its promise not to intervene in Ukraine. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
As many as 50 armed men seized a regional government headquarters in Crimea on Thursday and raised a Russian flag. The region provides a base for the Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Ukraine's new rulers in Kiev have warned that any movement by Russian forces beyond the base's territory would be tantamount to aggression. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov moved to assure U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry that Russia will respect Ukraine's territory. In response, the U.S. told Russia to show it's sincere about its promise. Washington is concerned after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a surprise military exercise on Ukraine's doorstep this week. Other Western nations like Britain and Germany are also calling on Russia to help ease the turmoil in Ukraine's Russian-dominated region. Also Thursday, the new Ukrainian government held its first cabinet meeting, led by newly appointed Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. In the meantime, ouster President Viktor Yanukovych is said to be in Russia, as Russian state news agencies reported he plans to hold a news conference on Friday. He has declared he is still Ukraine's president, but has lost support across almost the entire country. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
It's been 1 week since ARIRANG TV, Korea's only global broadcasting network, found a new TV home in the United States. In case you didn't already know, ARIRANG TV is now available on America's #1 satellite television provider, DirecTV, on channel number 2095. Our Hwang Ji-hye takes a look at how people in Southern California are enjoying their new channel so far.
Here at this hotel in southern Los Angeles, ARIRANG TV on DirecTV is available free of charge to guests.
We used to not have the ARIRANG TV and DirecTV like before, but since we are located in Wilshire and Weston, it's in the middle of Koreatown, it's good to have ARIRANG TV for the guests.
Starting last Thursday, DirecTV customers in the United States could find ARIRANG TV in their channel lineup on channel number 2095, as the Korean broadcasting station has been added to DirecTV's programming as a public interest channel. DirecTV, based in Southern California, is America's #1 satellite television provider that competes with cable TV. K-pop lovers Riley and Allison, who are huge fans of ARIRANG TV's after-school club programs, say they're delighted to have ARIRANG TV on DirecTV.
It's really convenient. We can just turn on the channel and the K-pop shows are already there.
We don't have to search for it on the internet anymore. We can just watch it on TV, so it's a lot easier.
ARIRANG CEO Son Ji-hye says she's confident the Korean broadcasting station will be able to raise awareness of Korea and Korean culture in the U.S. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News, Los Angeles.
Here now is a look at the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. That's all from me for this hour, but we have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6. Do join us then.